So during week 10, we're going to do the second part of our essential agreement components, where we will be discussing particularly distribution and finance agreements. I've mentioned various essential agreements last week, and I'm going to mention a few more and connected terms and conditions this week. I just want you to know that this is not a complete list of agreements that you will be dealing with when you are financing, producing, or distributing content. These are the main ones, the most important ones, and they'll help you to negotiate in a way that will protect you, your project, and your investor. But it's not a complete list.
This week's module covered the important terms for distribution agreements and closing agreements. As mentioned before, the distribution of a film and television project is really what drives the success of the project, and revenues and profits can be lost if distribution agreements do not include some very basic terms that can protect distribution revenues and as well the project, the producer, and the investor. During the closing, all agreement and terms must be made to fit together so the completion bond insurance can be issued and the production can start because funds can be released to the production account. We talked about the important contractual terms for sales and distribution agreements. We talked about some essential closing agreements and related terms. We are also looking into and have looked into the closing process itself. And so by now, you should be able to identify the important terms for distribution agreements, and you can identify the terms that can negatively impact the distribution of a film and TV program, and you know exactly what steps to take during the closing process.
We made the differentiation in an earlier module between the sales agent and the distributor. We're going to talk about the sales agency agreement as an agreement that represents a relationship between you and the sales agent, where the sales agent on your behalf will sell the rights to your film. Now, if this would be a distribution agreement, then the distributor who would sell your film would actually acquire rights. And if that is the case, and a distributor comes to you and says, I want a distribution agreement from you in order to sell your film or distribute your film worldwide, they would have to actually pay you a minimum guarantee for this rights assignment to be valid. So many times you will find a situation where the distributors want the rights, but they don't want to pay for that. So it is important that you understand the distinction between a sales agency agreement, which is the preferred agreement, and the distribution agreement, which you can do with a sales agent / distributor if they give you what is called a minimum guarantee payment.
These are just some important terms that I have dealt with the films and TV programs I have produced in finance. So I'm going to share my experience here. Again, this is not legal advice. Please consult with your lawyer. It's very important. And it's also not necessarily what other producers or financiers do. I'm sharing with you what I do, and you can take it or leave it, as we say. So in my sales agency agreements, I always put in a performance clause to make sure that my sales agent performs optimally. And that means that I'm going to use the sales estimates that he or she issued, and I'm going to put a time kind of milestone calendar into the agreement that the sales agent will allow me to put in there. And those milestones will tell me in the end what of the sales distribution revenues I can expect when. So can I expect, for example, 30% of the sales estimates to come in the first 6 months, or will it take 9 months? Can I expect the second 30% to come in the next 9 to 18 months? And can I expect the last 30% or so to come in within the 2 years, or a little less or a little more? I let the sales agent tell me what those milestones are because I don't want to put pressure on them, but I do need them to give me some kind of a window to allow me to understand how and when they are aiming to get these distribution revenues materialized. So I'm also looking at industry standard sales fees and expenses and marketing costs to be charged. So I don't want to be overcharged. So for most of my films and TV shows, I've paid between 15 and 25% of the distribution revenues that were materialized by the sales agent. Normally, these are international distribution rights revenues only, because the sales agents I've worked with, most of them do not handle US domestic rights. Those I usually handle with my agency. In my case, I'm represented by Gersh, but I've also worked with William Morris Endeavor and CAA, and they do the same thing. They represent my project for the domestic side of things, for the domestic market, and then pitch it to domestic distributors like studios or network stations or streamers. And I usually pay around 5 to 10% of whatever deal they can strike. So then we're talking about the collection agency provision in the sales agency agreement, which is very important to include, so that distribution revenues can be directed immediately into the collection agency account rather than going to the sales agent. We of course want the sales agent to agree and know that we're going to have a completion bond insurance, and that insurance will cover certain specified delivery elements. So I would like the sales agent to tell me what delivery elements they need for their distributors and be very specific. So don't, charge me for a theatrical delivery element list if I am doing a TV show. So I want them to be very specific, because otherwise I have to budget all of the delivery items because they are part of the distribution agreement. And the bond company is going to make me budget them. So this is a waste of money that I don't want to do. So I will ask the sales agent to really limit the delivery element list to exactly what he or she needs. The sales agents will not have any creative approval rights. The only difference is that the MG, if I get a sales agent to give me an MG, a minimum guarantee, meaning an advance, I then will give them approval rights in relation to some essential elements like cast, director, or the script genre, or maybe the budget even. So I would give them approval rights in a sense that I say, if I make a replacement that is of similar or higher value, you're not going to get to approve anything. And if you're not agreeing with me with what I'm approving, then we can have a conversation about it. The approval right I give them is really limited to a meaningful consultation, right? It's never really a pure approval. It's never a final say. I also will try to achieve a shorter term with the sales agent. So I'm not going to go into a sales agency agreement that's 25 years long. I'd rather do something that is maybe 3, 5, 10 years max. So when we have a sales agent who offers an MG to me, meaning an advance, I also would like to have that deal to be fair. So in the ideal world, I do not want to be required to assign all the distribution rights to the sales agent, even though many sales agents will ask for those when they give an MG. So I'm going to decline that, and I will tell the sales agent, I appreciate your MG, but you're still just selling distribution rights to a distributor. You're not actually releasing anything into theaters or on television or on streamers, because you're not doing that. That's not what you do. You're the in-between person between me and the distributor, and that's what I'm paying for. So I'd rather not assign any distribution rights, because with that I'm assigning the actual rights, and it's a dangerous thing to do. So I'm trying to avoid that. I will also, if I cannot get them to agree with me, then say, okay, fine, you're going to get the distribution rights you want, but I want them back the minute I paid off your minimum guarantee. And at that point, I also want the sales agency fee to be reduced to a normal level. Because normally when I get an MG, the sales agency fee can go up by 10%, 5%. So sometimes it could be up to like 35%. And with expenses, it could be even 40%. So it's a lot of money. And I'm willing to pay that during the period that I'm recouping the minimum guarantee advance that the sales agent gave me. But after that, I would like to be back on the normal level, which is around 15 to 25%. The sales agency should also agree to cash flow their minimum guarantee themselves. So they shouldn't ask me to take it to a bank and have the bank cash flow it. Even if the bank would cash flow it, the bank will charge me interest, so now I'm losing money. So in my humble view, I always ask the sales agent to cash flow their MG themselves and just put the money into the escrow controlled production account. Of course, I'm going to ask the sales agent to agree to a collection agency provision to allow the collection agent to pay any fees due to the sales agent and to allow the distributor to pay to the collection agency management account. And these are the main terms I will look into when I put together a sales agency agreement.
When I'm talking about distribution agreements, I'm not talking about the distribution agreement that is similar to a sales agent, someone who sells the movie for you worldwide. I'm talking about the actual distribution agreement with a buyer. We're not talking about someone who is buying the rights to release your film in their country for a certain period of time and pays you a license fee to be allowed to do that.
So we have the distribution licensing agreement, which is a regular distribution agreement with a distributor where the distributor buys a license for that territory that's usually exclusive and that allows them to release my film or TV program on the platforms they have agreed to buy. So that could be a theatrical distributor who would buy theatrical distribution rights for a film and would also buy all the other rights, meaning DVD, VOD, TV, online rights, and then either release that on the platforms they themselves control or resell those rights in their territory and then recoup some of the minimum guarantee back. So that's their option. That is absolutely up to the distributor, and they can decide what they do with the rights that they have acquired. There are, of course, pre-sale distribution agreements. They're basically the same than a distribution license agreement. The only difference is that those pre-sale distribution agreements are concluded before the film is being produced and before I start production on a TV project. The sales agent minimum guarantee is kind of the same thing. It's like a pre-sale in that sense because it's a minimum advance that is paid against distribution rights revenues that are coming in. A pickup deal or a negative pickup deal is basically when I am pitching a project or a concept to, let's say, Netflix, and they say it's a great idea, we want to do it, we're going to finance it, we're going to handle the development, production, and everything, and we're going to pay you a rights fee and we're going to pay you a producer fee. And in that case, they take over the project. They may or may not ever do it, it's totally up to them, but they take it over from me. So what I have to think about then is, if they don't ever realize the project, is there a way for me to get it back? So will there be a clause in there that says, if we don't realize it within so and so many years, you can buy it back from us by paying what we paid you or paying something in the range of what we paid you. So that's something to talk about with anyone who a producer would give a project to based on an idea or a concept that they then develop and produce and distribute or not. The other thing that can happen here is that it's a negative pickup, meaning the project's already produced and it's screened, and let's say it's a movie that's screening on Sundance, and then a buyer comes along to say, oh, I love that movie, I'm going to buy all rights, and it's now mine. In both cases, all the distribution rights and all the IP rights and all the related revenues are with whoever buys those rights. They're with the distributor. They're no longer with me. The split rights deal is a little different. Only the territory that is acquired would then be treated like, for example, a negative pickup deal or a pickup deal where the distributor, who maybe, let's say, just pays for the domestic rights and buys the domestic rights, they would then control all the IP rights, all the revenues for that territory that they have bought. And I will then still own all the foreign rights. And in that sense, I want to make sure that my license fee that I'm getting for this is higher than a regular license fee. Otherwise, what's the point? I might as well just do a distribution license agreement. So if they want to do a split rights deal where they own everything in perpetuity, meaning forever, they're going to have to pay me more. They're going to have to pay me at least 20 to 40% more than what I would get with a license agreement. Otherwise, there's no point for me to do this, unless I have no other deal on the table, and then, of course, I'm going to do it. But the idea here is to make more money for this kind of license. The co-production agreement with the studio or streamer or network is similar to the split rights deal, but here the creative choices are a part of the approval rights that is given to the studio streamer or network. So as I'm putting the project together, they can tell me we want this director, or we want this cast, or we wanted to change the concept of the script this way. So they have some creative approval rights. They're like more like a co-producer than someone who just acquires the rights for their territory. And then there's a network time-buy agreement, which basically allows me to become the network within the network. So I'm now buying time on a network to release my show. This is normally done for TV series. And I control the IP, I control the content. I don't need to get any notes from them. It's all mine. As mentioned before, this is only available really for producers that have a strong track record and deliver high quality shows that look like they also could have been commissioned by the network. So this is something that is not available for everyone. It's also not advertised because networks really don't want, people to know about this. They don't want people to know that, we can buy time on the network and give them a show and it looks like it's theirs. So it's a bit of an exclusive circle, but it is done and it can be done. And the beautiful thing about it is that I can now also make money with the commercial breaks that are within that time slot that I bought, if it is a network that offers commercial breaks. The not so good thing about it is that I'm paying to be seen on that network. And I'm not getting a license for the US, but I can still get a license for the US after the exclusive window, which is usually just 3 months, has expired. And then I can sell it to another network, or I can sell it to a streamer, or I can sell it on VOD, or I can put it on Amazon Prime. Whatever I want to do, I can still exploit it in the US and make money with it. And then, of course, I own the international rights. And the beautiful thing with the buy-on is if I buy on a network that is known and that is strong, I can sell my TV series internationally quite well because it has a US distribution component to it. And then there is the revenue sharing distribution deal. Oh, by the way, about the network time buy, I want to just say something else. Sometimes these time buy deals are done by agencies that represent the network whose time is being sold. They're normally not exclusive, so meaning a network station has many agencies that do this. And some of them actually sometimes ask for an upfront payment from me. These are not the kind of agencies I want to work with. I usually decline it. I know they ask for it. I've had people ask me for it. So I say no, and then I work with another agency if I don't have the direct relationship with the network, who will then charge me a commission based on the deal that's being struck. So whatever I pay the network for the time, I would have to pay the agency a percentage of on top. Now, there are agencies that work directly with the network, and some of them are exclusive. And if they work directly with the network that I'm buying time on, they often get paid by the network. So I don't actually have to pay them. So I do some of my TV series like that, and I work directly with the network, and I work with agencies that work exclusively for the network that are not charging me any fees. So I wanted to just add that. And then the revenue sharing deal is basically done where I sell content to like a platform, let's say, or distributor who releases and then shares the distribution revenues with me. Here, the idea is to not get distribution revenues based on net profits, because there may not ever be any given the cost that the distributor has and will list and deduct. The idea here would be to either do a gross revenue share, so the producer actually participates in the gross revenues without any deduction, which is usually a smaller percentage, or the adjusted gross revenue, where just limited deductions are allowed, like the distribution fee and maybe some kind of marketing fee, but that's it. And then the revenue share for the producer is a little more than the gross revenue share, and the deductions are very defined. And then, of course, we have the rent-a-studio deal. So here we know we're going to have a movie and we're going to deal, let's say, with the Paramount, and they will handle the release campaign. We will raise the P&A as the producer, and when we hand it to them, we'll talk together with them about what kind of release campaign is being discussed, what it will cost, how the money is being applied, and so forth. We talked about rent-a-studio deal. Now, what is important here is that we want to make sure the distribution fee with the studio is feasible, as low as possible. The exhibitor split that they agree with the exhibitor for our movie is so that we get a good strong share and not paying everything to the exhibitor, so that's nothing's left. And we have to really be careful to do that as producers, because we have the responsibility to pay the P&A lender back. Whoever gave us the money for the P&A, for the print and advertising, to pay the studio for the release campaign that they do, is going to want to be paid back. And they get paid back from box office revenues and distribution revenues from the US. Now, after the rent-a-studio deal, I can obviously still sell my movie to the network stations, to streamers, to VOD, to all the other domestic outlets, and I can also, of course, sell my movie internationally. However, I do take a box office risk here, because I do have a large P&A investor probably included in this, because these P&A campaigns are not cheap, and I have to think about the fact that they have to be repaid. So on that level, I also have to make sure that the P&A lender is not going to charge me an arm and a leg. Usually the premium here should not be more than 25% on the P&A investment that is being made to me on my movie that is being released through a studio with the rent-a-studio deal. Let's take a look at some of the essential closing agreements. By the way, that list is very long. I'm only going to mention some essential ones. And of course, the list varies greatly based on what project is being produced, who the involved parties are. So it could be a huge list with 200 agreements, and it could be a very small list with maybe 10. So it really depends on what project it is as to what the closing agreement list will look like. So first, we're going to put together the SPV operating agreement and any membership interests if we have investors. So this is the operating agreement for our production vehicle, for our SPV, our production LLC. That's the first one. We then, have the collection agent draft the CAMA, where he puts all our finance and distribution agreements into one agreement and reflects the terms that we have agreed in those agreements in there. Then we're going to deal with the completion bond, who is going to look at all the essential documentations that we have, like the budget, the production schedule, the cash flow plan. It's going to look at all the distribution agreements, it's going to look at all the cast and the director agreements, the talent agreements, the co-producer agreement. The completion bond company is going to look at the chain of title. They look at pretty much everything. In the first step, they only look at 3 things. They look at the budget, they look at the schedule, and they look at the production cash flow plan. These are the 3 things. Oh, and the script, sorry, 4 things. So the production cash flow plan is not necessary, so it's usually just the 3 items. But based on that, they can give me a letter of intent, which I then can use, because it's going to list all the other things that they'll need from me to give to them, which is a beautiful thing. I know exactly, this is the list that I have to give them, this is what I still need to deliver to them. And then they're also going to tell me what they're not insuring in my case. And there might be some exclusions. For example, they usually may not insure the chain of title. So there are certain things that they will tell me that they will not insure. And then I'm going to work on the inter-party agreement, a little similar to the CAMA in a sense that it'll put all the financiers together in one agreement, and the sales agent and distributors, and make sure all those terms are reflected in that one agreement. And then there's a long list of exhibits that is in the inter-party agreement. You're going to see it in the module. It's long. So not all of these agreements are always necessary, depending on what project you're producing, but a lot of them are. And then there are distribution agreements, for example, the pre-sale agreements that we have. And then there are NOAs, notices of assignments, that are drafted by the senior lender and that are having to be signed by the distributors, because they direct the payment that the distributor is making to the lender, and not to the producer or to the sales agent, but directly to the lender. Sometimes the lender is not part of the collection agreement, and the lender requires a separate account where they say, we want our senior loan paid back directly, not through the collection account, and we want the distributors to pay us directly, and that's what the NOAs will say. We're also going to have to finalize the senior lending agreement with the bank. If we have a mezzanine lender, we have to do the junior lending agreement. If we have an incentive loan, which we hopefully do, because it's important, it's a non-recoupable finance source, we're going to do that lending agreement. If we have any co-production agreements or producer agreements with people that helped us put this movie together or help us raise an incentive, we're going to finalize those. We're obviously going to finalize the chain of title and related agreements. We're going to finalize all the talent engagement agreements. We're going to do, if we have in-kind service deals or deferment agreements, we're going to finalize those. And I already mentioned the co-producer agreements. I know here twice. I'm going to take those out. Yes, so this is not a complete list, just remember. It is the most essential list. Let's take a look at the CAMA and the inter-party agreement. So the main thing for the CAMA is that they will put all the financial parties and distribution parties and anyone who gets any payment or any profit participation in that agreement. And the function of the CAMA agreement is really to be the underlying force that directs the collection agent management account and all services included. The inter-party is similar in a sense that it requires many of the same agreement, but it has a lot of extra stuff that is exhibited with it, that is attached with it. And the inter-party is really just a combination of all these agreements and related rights that come with it, but it's not issued by someone who's handling a collection account or who's taking any money or is making any payments. So that's the difference, the main difference between the two. Let's take a look at the completion bond agreement. We've mentioned various times that the completion bond insurance is needed when you have a senior loan or when a producer has a senior loan. It's required by many financiers if they know what they're doing, because it covers and protects the on-budget and on-time production of a film or television project. So it is something that is quite important to avoid budget overages and delays. So for us as producers, we have to look at a few things, because we want to make sure that the completion bond agreement is not going to stifle us and make it hard for us to even make the project, the movie or TV show. So many times the completion bond company will ask us to hold back our producer fee. Some cases they ask for all of it, some cases they ask for half of it, and our job is to make this holdback as small as possible. So the idea is to create a budget with the completion bond company that they're comfortable with, so that they're not asking for a huge producer holdback from us, the producer, because we're losing money and we're risking our money. And we've done a lot of hard work to make this project happen, so we should be able to make some money with it. Our job is also to reduce the contingency, because if the contingency is 10%, which they often will ask for, we have to, as producers, find the money to cover this. We have to raise production financing for this, and who knows if we're ever going to need the contingency. The contingency is really a risk mitigation tool for the bond company. So it's in our interest as the producer to keep it low, and the completion bond company is going to push to up it up. So our job is to say, why do you need a high contingency? What are the production line items you would like me to maybe expand on if possible to avoid this contingency component? We want to apply certain exclusions if we can to take out of the completion bond insurance, so that they don't charge us a completion bond fee on them. As we mentioned earlier, they're not going to likely insure the chain of title, so we can take that out. We can take development fees out. We can maybe take producer fees out. Maybe we can take some legal and finance fees out. So there are a few things that we can talk to the completion bond company to take out, because we're not going to need them to be insured. We are, when we talk about a completion bond fee, totally within our rights to ask the completion bond company to refund us part of the completion bond fee if we come in on or under budget. We want the bond claims, if there are any, to be recouped if they are being recouped, and that's a big if. But if the completion bond company forces us to recoup them and be included in the CAMA agreement as a beneficiary, we want them to be recouped after all the investments are paid, because otherwise it's going to be very hard for us to get our financier comfortable with the fact that they have to deal with overages potentially. And that's not a good thing. We're trying to protect the investor, and if the bond company asks us to be put into the waterfall before the investor, it's not going to do the investor any good. So the job is here to move them behind the investor, which they often agree to. It's not going to be that difficult to ask for. So if we can't kick them out of the waterfall, we want to at least have the bond company agree to be behind the investor and the premium. We're going to make sure that we're going to talk to the bond company about a budget that is still feasible, because we have to also make sure that our finance plan works. Remember, we have to cover 70 to 75% of the budget through international sales estimates, and if the budget shoots up because the bond company makes it expensive, it's going to potentially not be great with our finance plan. So we want to make sure that we can still finance this budget after the bond company asks us to potentially increase it. We don't want to do any essential elements with distribution agreements. So when we do pre-sales, for example, and it says in there, I want this and this actor and this director. Theoretically, we can agree to that as long as we have the option to replace the actor or the director with someone that we choose that will not change the value for the distributor. So someone of similar or higher value. And that language is important to be included in the distribution agreement, because otherwise the completion bond company is going to have an issue with that agreement. Also cast, when we hire cast, and let's say they have to be off our set at a certain time or day because they have another project after hours, we want to make sure that there's enough time between our project ending and the cast or director's next project starting. So that should be at least a month, if we can make that happen. So we want to not put any stop dates in there that basically say to us the cast or director is only going to be available to us until that date, and then we'll leave the production. Bond companies are going to have a hard time with that. And then there is something called a takeover. The takeover means if we are running behind schedule and we are not adhering to the budgeted line items, the completion bond company has the right to take the movie away from us, to take the project away from us and basically finish it the way they want to. They'll take over the production account, and they're going to take the money that's still available to cover everything, and we are basically off the picture, which is not a great thing. So we want to kind of avoid that. So the takeover language for them to do that should therefore be very specific, meaning what percentage are we actually having to be over budget for them to have the right to take our movie over? And then the second thing is, if we have a delay, how many days of delay do we have to have in order for them to take over the movie? So it should be very defined. It should not be vague, where they say, oh, you know, if you're a little bit over budget, we take it over. No, it should say, if it's this percent over budget, we are coming to step in. If it's this many days of delay in the shooting schedule, we are coming and step in. Let's take a look at the closing process. The closing day is basically the day the completion bond insurance is issued, because when the completion bond insurance is issued, the funds are released to us in accordance with the bonded cash flow plan, and we can then start producing our movie. So there is something called first day payments, and these are payments that are released on the first day of the completion bond closing. In many cases, it's the rights payment, so it's a script purchase price, anything that's due to pay for the underlying rights to purchase them. Also, all the cast fees are due, so all the actors are getting paid up front. They don't get paid in installments, they get their fee all up front. Then any reimbursement for advances that we made, let's say we had to pay the pre-production period ourselves, and we got the bond to close a little later, so there are payments that we made that are already budgeted, but we advanced them, so we can get that money back. Development expenses are being paid and all related costs. And then, of course, we get the payment that is due to us per the production cash flow plan for the first few weeks or week. And then we get paid every week or every 2 weeks per the bonded production cash flow schedule.
You are marching towards the finals. So what we are doing this week in order to get you ready for this is going to be a final prep assignment. And that assignment is due by Sunday. It will be very close to one of the major questions in the final. So make sure you watch the step-by-step video when you do the assignment, and then use that video and your assignment in order to do the final. Of course, you'll check again on the calendar and with announcements for additional key activities. I don't think I will be giving you any because I'd like you to prepare for the final. But should there be anything that I come up with, I will definitely let you know. As we're getting closer and closer towards the end of the course and towards the final, if there is anything that is still not registering clearly with you, or there's any assignments that you have trouble with, or any quizzes that you have questions about, feel free to reach out and we can set a one-on-one meeting for me to walk you through anything that still needs some clarification for you, because I want you to make sure I want to make sure that you are ready for the final and that there are no open questions that you have about any of the material here. So feel free to reach out and we can set a one-on-one meeting to discuss anything that is still unclear. Other than that, get ready for our final week.